If you think used cooking oil collection is just a truck emptying a restaurant's bin, you're missing the part where most of the money and most of the mistakes actually happen. So, in this video, I'm going to walk you through the complete process, starting with the oil coming out of the fryer, then the restaurant container, the collection route, what happens at the depot, and finally, how that oil becomes a usable feedstock for products like biodiesel or renewable diesel. And honestly, the important thing to understand is that every company handles parts of this differently. The equipment changes, the way they measure a pickup changes, the agreement with the restaurant changes, but the operating flow is generally the same. Let's start inside the restaurant. Fresh cooking oil goes into the fryer, it gets used repeatedly, and eventually the kitchen decides that the oil is no longer suitable for cooking. At this point, depending on the kitchen's equipment, the oil is either allowed to cool before handling or moved through a closed system designed for it, and then it goes into a dedicated used cooking oil container. That container could be a small barrel, a wheeled bin, or a much larger outdoor tank. It may be filled manually, or the restaurant may have an enclosed system that moves the oil from the kitchen to the storage tank. And this is where the first important decision comes in. Used cooking oil is not the same thing as grease trap waste. Used cooking oil is the fryer oil that the restaurant intentionally keeps separate for collection. Grease trap material normally contains a much messier combination of water, food solids, fats, oils, and grease captured from the wastewater system. There are different collection streams with different equipments, economics, and processing requirements. For used cooking oil, keeping the container reasonably clean matters. Water, food waste, cleaning chemicals, or other containments can reduce how much usable oil comes out of the pickup, and they can create a disagreement later when the collector or processor measures the load. Now the oil is sitting behind the restaurant, but that does not automatically mean a truck should go pick it up. The next step is deciding when that container is actually ready. Some collectors run on a fixed schedule. Maybe the restaurants get serviced every week, every 2 weeks, or once a month. That's simple, but it can create two opposite problems. If you arrive too early, the driver spends time reaching the location, opening the enclosure, setting up the hose, and recording the stop, only to collect a small amount of oil. If you arrive too late, the containers can overflow, the restaurant can complain, or the oil can disappear before your truck gets there. So, a stronger scheduling method uses the restaurant's actual pickup history. For example, if you collected 80 gallons after 14 days, then 85 gallons after another 14 days, you have a much better starting point for predicting when that container will be worth visiting again. For a new restaurant, you don't have that history yet, so the first few pickups are estimates. You might look at the container size, the restaurant type, the number of fryers, seasonality, and what the restaurant tells you. Some locations may also have a fill level sensor, but you shouldn't need a sensor on every container to build a workable schedule. Once the collector decides which containers are ready, the job becomes a route planning problem, but not a normal delivery route problem. A delivery route normally starts with a fixed list of addresses and asks, what is the shortest order? A cooking oil route has to ask a few questions before that. What containers have enough oil to justify a stop? How many gallons should we expect at each one? When can the driver access the container? How much can this particular truck hold? And where will the truck unload if it fills before the route is finished? For example, imagine a truck that has 1000 gallons of usable room and the route is expected to collect 180, 240, 300, 190, and 220 gallons. That looks like 5 restaurant stops on a map, but it is 1130 expected gallons on the truck. So unless the collector plans an unloading stop, moves one restaurant to another route, or sends a larger truck, that route has already broken before the driver leaves. And the real day will never match the estimate perfectly. A stop expected to produce 180 gallons might produce 120. Another one might produce 230. That is why the driver's actual pickup records matter so much. When the truck reaches the restaurant, the driver first needs to confirm that they are the correct container and that container is accessible. Depending on the operation, the driver may record the container ID, take a before photo, check the lid, look for damage or signs of contamination, and note anything unusual about the level. Then the driver connects the collection equipment and transfers the oil into the truck's tank. Smaller operations may handle drums or other containers differently, but the important operating event is the same. Oil leaves a known restaurant container and enters a known truck. The pickup then needs an actual quantity. Some collectors measure volume with truck mounted meters, some work from tank measurements, some reconcile the pickup using scale weights. The exact method depends on the equipment and the commercial agreement, but the record should make that method clear. At minimum, you want to know which account and container were serviced, when the driver was there, how much was collected, who completed the stop, and whether there was water contamination, damage, or any other exception. Photo and location records can support that. They help answer a very common question later. Did we actually service this container, and what condition was it in when we arrived? And if the restaurant expected the bin to be full, but the driver only collected 12 gallons, that doesn't automatically prove theft. It could be theft, but it could also be a bad forecast, a restaurant closure, a menu change, or another unauthorized pickup, an incorrect container record, or a driver measurement problem. The stop record is what lets the collector investigate instead of guessing. As the truck moves through the route, every actual pickup changes the truck's remaining capacity. This is one of the most important parts of the entire workflow. The dispatcher shouldn't just know that the truck has completed 4 stops. They should know how many gallons are now on the truck and how much room remains for the next stop. If the truck reaches its usable limit, it needs to unload. That might happen at the collector's depot, a transfer or aggregation facility, or directly at a processor, depending on how the business is set up. When the truck unloads, the route collections records should be reconciled against what the receiving meter or scale says arrived. So if the individual pickup records add up to 2100 gallons, but the receiving records says something materially different, that difference needs an explanation. It might be measurement tolerance, water, residual oil in the truck, or a missing record, or an equipment issue. What matters is that the collector can trace the load back up to the stops that created it. Now we get to the recycling side. The oil coming off the collection truck normally isn't finished fuel. It's still a raw recovered material, and it may contain water, food particles, and other impurities. Depending on the facility, the oil may be allowed to settle, heated, filtered, or otherwise separated so water and solids can be removed. The processor evaluates what was actually received, but clean oil and heavily contaminated oil do not have the same usable yield or value. After that preparation, the recovered oil can enter different downstream markets. One established path is biodiesel production, where fats and oils are chemically converted into biodiesel and glycerin. Used cooking oil can also be used as a feedstock for renewable diesel and other approved fuel pathways depending on the processor and the market. But raw used cooking oil is not automatically biodiesel. Collection, cleaning, processing, quality control, and the actual fuel conversion step all have to happen between the restaurant and the finished product. And the records continue to matter downstream. Processors and buyers may need to know the source, date, quantity, and quality of the material they received. That means the information captured at a restaurant stop can matter long after the driver leaves the location. The money can also move differently depending on the market and the contract. A restaurant might receive free collection It may pay for services, or it may receive a rebate based on the actual amount and quality of oil collected. For collector, the value isn't simply gallons picked up. It's the usable oil recovered minus the restaurant rebates, truck time, driver time, mileage, unloading, contamination, and processor or handling costs. So a truck coming back full can still represent a weak route if it took too many miles and too many low volume stops to fill it. That's really the complete chain. The restaurant separates and stores the oil. The collector predicts when the container will be ready. The dispatcher selects the stops and builds a route around access and truck capacity. The driver transfers and records the actual pickup. The depot reconciles the load. The processor removes water and solids, and then the recovered oil moves into the appropriate downstream fuel or recycling market. The reason I'm so interested in this workflow is that normally a route planner mainly sees the addresses or drive time. But a used cooking oil collector sees containers filling at different rates, uncertain gallons, customer commitments, a truck with hard limits, and a load whose value depends on the records attached to it. That's the operating pattern DynoRoute is built around. Planning and dispatching recurring collection around trucks' capacity and unloading stops while keeping the service records that make the next readiness estimate stronger. In the next video, I'm going to take this exact workflow and build an actual used cooking oil collection route, including expected gallons, likely dry stops, and truck capacity, restaurant access windows, and the unload decision. So if you run these routes today, I'd like to know where your process usually breaks. Is it predicting the oil, getting the access to container, proving the quantity, or keeping the truck inside capacity? Put that in the comments below, because those are the practical problems that we are going to work through on this channel.